Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions, and today's opinions will be about The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. And this book just did not live up to the previous two, in my personal opinion. So The Republic of Thieves is the third book in the Gentleman Bastard series. It follows Locke and Jean as they get cornered into working for the Bonds Magi of Carthage. They have been, for lack of a better word, hired to help manage the election in Carthage. Every 5 years, the two parties, the Deep Roots Party and the Black Iris Party, fight it out to figure out who's going to have more representatives in the council. The Bonds Magi themselves, at least on the surface, appear to not be involved at all, but behind the scenes, they are basically playing these elections like games. People on both sides will hire agents to direct the parties and guide them and help them manipulate the election, and pretty much anything's on the table just shy of murder. Locke and Jean are hired to support the Deep Roots Party and get them elected, but their opponent, who is supporting the Black Iris Party, is Sabetha, the last member of the Gentleman Bastards gang, who we have not met as of yet. The one who abandoned them 5 years ago, abandoning her friends, her home, and her lover, Locke. As the political game plays out, Locke is hoping that he'll get a chance to work it out with Sabetha. But with the Bonds Magi involved, the Gentleman Bastards know that there's going to be more going on than a simple political game. Okay, so yeah, I did not find this book nearly as fun or as entertaining or as interesting as the previous two. And some of that is just going to be personal tastes, but some of this is, I honestly think there are some serious flaws in this book. The book lacked some of the things I loved in the previous books. Specifically, if you watched my review of The Lies of Locke Lamora, you might remember that I gushed about how much I loved the fact that the author made the setting really its own special character. There's all this incredibly emotive and evocative setting description. And like the setting descriptions are sort of used to introduce to us who the people are and how they interact with the world by the descriptions of simple architecture. And I thought it was really well done and really cool. And this one just sort of didn't have that. And, like, we get a lot less description of setting in general, and I think part of that stems from the fact that this book is not all in one place. The first book is literally just in Camorra. The second book is in two places, but it's two places. It's the city, Tell, whatever, and out at sea, basically. But this one, no, we start in Lashane, we go on the Amethyl, which is sea, we spend some time in Carthage, and on top of that we have an entire secondary book, basically, in the flashbacks, which starts in Camorra, spends a lot of time traveling, and ends up in Aspara. And yeah, that's only 6 places, which would not be a lot for a travel-based book. But this is not a travel-based book. And it just didn't really give the time to give these incredible evocative descriptions that you get in all the others. And like this book, I think there are really only 4 places that get those kind of descriptions. There's the Amethyl, the sea, there's the prison in Aspara, there's the bridges of Carthage, and there's these weird cliffs with closed locked doors on them that were fascinating. Like, honestly, it was one of my favorite parts of the book. But the problem is, it's this beautiful evocative description out of nowhere, pretty near the end of the book. And like, I loved it. It was one of my favorite bits. I'd be sad if it was cut, but I objectively don't know why it's there. And because it came so late, it felt like it had to be really meaningful for the plot. And if it was, I didn't get it. I also want to talk about theater stuff, and this is all gonna sound really pedantic and stupid, and I'm sorry, but I have to do it. I feel like the author knew a little bit too much and a little bit too little about theater to write the flashback plot. Because all of the flashback plot is about the Gentleman Bastards, the one summer they spent in Aspara acting on the stage. And I'm sorry, but you don't start rehearsals when most of the cast has not read the play. You don't start without a first read. Like, that is the first step of any rehearsal of a non-improv based show. And you certainly don't start when you haven't cast the majority of the show. Unless you're going to do that wonderful fun thing where all the different peoples in the ensemble are going to be playing the different roles. But that's not what's happening here. This is a pretty solid, like, will be a normal casted role. But on top of that, there's just the money stuff, and like, this is not me making gripes about historical stuff, like, I believe fantasy does not have to be historically accurate because it's fantasy. But I'm sorry, the math doesn't work. They work for months rehearsing a play that's only ever going to get 2 performances? 2? If you have a professional theater company that is working on rehearsals for months, there's going to be at least a couple-week run to make up for the money. And like most of the theater troupes that operate the way the one in this book appeared, are usually ones that are going to be repertoire theater companies. They're going to have like 5 or 6, maybe even up to 12 plays that they have rehearsed at any given time that they can pull out to perform when needed. And like each play that they perform, there's the assumption they're going to be performing it for at least a few weeks, and not like 1 or 2 times a week. I'm talking about like, 4 or 5 at least times a week. And this is all because of money. All of these plays, you gotta pay for the props, the costumes, the sets. You gotta pay for all the like trench diggers, the awnings. Usually you'd have to pay for the theater, but they explain why they don't have to here. But you gotta pay the patron, and on top of that, you need to have enough money at the end to pay a company full of actors enough money to survive long enough to make it through the rehearsals, to have housing, to eat, to drink an absurd amount of alcohol, and just generally live their lives. And I don't see 2 shows producing enough money for all that. And it annoyed me because this was all a plot contrivance that didn't need to be there. Like, this could have easily been adjusted by changing 1 line to say that this is the first night of a 2-week run, instead of having it just be, oh yeah, we got 2 shows. That's it. And there's also just a lot of other stupid theater things. Like, I did like the way they talk about the characters feeling on stage. That felt accurate to me. I really loved the fact that they took the time to have a character basically describe very basic text analysis in a way that someone who has not sat down with a monologue and 7 million colored pencils to mark out stress symbols will understand. I love the way it's presented with the audience reacting to the players on stage. That is very accurate to the kind of world that is presented in this book. But there's also stuff like, this book really does focus in on one of the tropes that is super common in theater, when theater is presented in literature, that actors are like super over-the-top, passionate nut jobs who are like, yeah, all the time. And yeah, I'm sure those people do exist, but I haven't met them outside of high schools. Like, that's something that high school theater kids do. It's not something that adult actors do. And I didn't buy that the Gentlemen Bastards would not be great actors from moment 1. And they're presented as being mediocre at best. But, like, their day job is improv acting. They're confidence men. This should be instinctive for them. And, like, especially with Locke, because there's so much stuff in book 1 and 2 about Locke, like, putting on these characters and just disappearing into them. Like, people don't even notice he's this tiny, slight guy because he just exudes a different aura when he's in character. And that's acting. I really expected there to be a plot line in here of all the Gentlemen Bastards being ridiculously good on stage, or having it be one of those moments that they're all, like, terrible at it until someone, probably Jean, points out, like, y'all do realize that this sort of acting is the same thing as, like, puking in front of a crowd so that the police don't notice that your friend is stealing something. Like, this is acting. You have experience. But we don't get that plot line. And it doesn't feel like one of those, ooh, surprise, we're going something different, some different way kind of thing. It instead feels more like just a failed opportunity. But there's also one more utterly ridiculous thing. There's a moment in the book where one of the characters, I believe it was Locke, made a comment about, like, the real world isn't like a play where at the end of the night a chorus walks out on stage to tell you the moral of the story. And this is infuriating because we only see the end of one play in this entire book, and it doesn't end with a chorus. It ends with a tableau. And I'm just like, dude, you got the fact that this is supposed to be here and you didn't include it in the actual play. But all of that is stupid, ridiculous, pedantic shit that I only paid attention to because A, I wasn't enjoying the book as much as I wanted to, but also because I have a theater degree and, I gotta use it somehow, guys. But moving on to more important thing, there's also the fact that this is a political intrigue book that is trying its damnedest to present as little political intrigue on page as possible. Which, I mean, isn't a problem for me, because I don't really like the whole, like, ooh, I need this guy on my side, but I don't know if I can trust him, so I need to get this blackmail material over here kind of drama. That's not something I really go in for in reading. But instead we just see a lot of Locke, Jean, and Sabetha tracking spies in their ranks, putting spies in each other's ranks, pulling stupid pranks on each other, like most of it feels like pranks, breaking into a couple of houses, buying a few votes. We only hear in passing that they're actually doing things that I would consider actual campaigning, like talking to voters, making promises, offering freebies. And like I said, like, I don't really like political intrigue books, but the problem with this is we see them, like, supposing to have this goal, but all the action we see is tangential around the goal. We don't really see them taking any actions directly towards the goal, and that made it feel a little bit directionless. Also, there's the whole mage thing. Like, honestly, one of the things I loved about this book is how the Bonds Magi are presented here. They are very other. Usually wizards and mages in books are really human. Like, they are kindly mentors, or they're cruel dictators, they're super humble or super ambitious. They have human wants and desires, they interact with humans the way other humans interact with each other. But these magic users are aggressively separate from the people around them. They clearly think of normal people as sort of a lesser species, and they interact with each other in really alien ways. They mostly interact telepathically, and it doesn't sound a lot like normal speech. They use people as pawns or puppets, and not in the light way that the Gentleman Bastards are, you know, manipulating people. That is built on the necessity for people to have motives and desires. But the way the Bonds Magi are doing it really treats them as objects. And these mages are also incredibly powerful. They're considered nigh on indestructible or unbeatable, though they are very human and can be killed that way. But the point here is they're written as very other. And they also have this mysterious, private, deeper purpose. So there is minor spoilers here, but the Bonds Magi formed their weird separatist little government because they believed that some unbeatable force destroyed the people that existed in this world before them, the Eldrin. And because the Eldrin's magic was clearly significantly more powerful than modern magic, they think that whenever this dark force comes back, which it inevitably will as soon as they draw its attention, they will be, you know, helpless. And so they have separated and taken control of all magic in the world in a desperate attempt to prevent this from happening. And basically this is the Dark Forest theory, but for fantasy. Now, if you don't know the Dark Forest theory, look it up from somebody else. I'm not the person to explain it to you, but basically the concept is the reason humans haven't discovered other species out in the universe is because there's something dark and evil and lurking out there that if you draw too much attention, it will come and eat you. And that's what's happening in this book. Except, you know, with magic. And I don't like or believe this theory in real life when it comes to aliens, so it really annoyed me to find it popping up in my fantasy reading. And to me, it is just as flawed as an argument here as it is in the real world. And the flaw basically is, there are 7 million reasons the Eldrin might not exist in this world anymore. They could be, like, they could have just decided that their time was up and stopped having kids. They could have moved to a different location in this world that our current people have not yet discovered. They could still be in the exact same place and just exist in a way that the current people can't perceive them. They might have destroyed themselves with magic, but a magic that specifically only destroys living beings and not, like, the buildings around them. They could have died of plague. They could have died of famine. They could have wandered to where these people's ancestors were and just interbred with them, and no one really paid attention because it was just strangers coming in and breeding with them. Like, there are so many possible things that could have happened to them without the need of some dark force to appear out of nowhere and zap them out of being. And the problem here is the Magi. This entire force of magic users in this world have completely shaped their interaction with the world around this theory. They are so concerned about it that they have basically controlled the entire, like, state of magic in this world. And I don't buy it. And because I don't buy it, I also don't quite buy the setup that we have here of, like, ooh, they're a bit evil, but they may be a necessary evil, because I don't really think that their fear is a valid one. But that finally brings me to the main reason this book did not live up to the previous two, in my opinion. Sabetha. She is such an important part of this book. Like, a good bit of the political plotting and the scenery porn and the fun heist stuff, I suspect it was all sacrificed in necessity to make more room for the Locke and Sabetha will they, won't they, will they, won't they, will they, won't they story. And I'm like, sure, fine. Like, I do like a good romance in my fantasy. But this ain't it. And part of the reason that I did not like it and found it incredibly annoying is just, I don't like Sabetha. And throughout the majority of the book, there's like one scene that I found her tolerably, you know, enjoyable as a character. And it's because she is bitchy. She is constantly, seemingly on purpose, taking Locke's words in the worst way possible. She's constantly refusing to listen to him when he tries to explain things. She's refusing to believe him when he tells her his feelings. She throws up roadblocks left, right, and center, all the while acknowledging that she wants to be in a relationship with him. And she just comes across as the embodiment of the trope that girls are just so hard to understand. They're so irrational. They're so emotional. They're so mercurial. And there's a lot of hinting pretty much from the beginning that there's some dark secret here. That there's some reason for her not to trust Locke personally. And in the end, there just isn't really. There's a reason for her to mistrust men in general. Spoiler here, she's a redhead, and it seems that in this world, redheaded virgin girls are in exceptional danger of being sexually trafficked and horrifically abused. And, like, yeah, that's a valid reason to have her be a defensive, like, skittish, angry character. But we only see her being wary and defensive and standoffish with Locke. She's not defensive with Callo and Galdo, who honestly are the ones she probably should be. She's not defensive around Jean. She's not defensive around all the other men in the book. It's just Locke. And this is even weirder because we read all of this through Locke's point of view. We see very little from Sabetha's point of view. And that means we know at all times that Locke is head over heels, thinks of her as a goddess, obsessively in love with her. He is constantly telling her how much he finds her amazing. He is constantly apologizing, even when he didn't really do anything wrong. And the one time that he actually asks her to apologize for what, in my opinion, was a legit reason, he immediately folds as soon as she pushes back at all. He lets her beat him up just so she can be in the same room with him. And he does pretty much anything she asks of him. But because he mentions liking her hair, she just assumes he's fetishizing it and assumes that he is somehow a threat to her. And this all feels forced. It all feels like she is overreacting because we know what's actually on Locke's mind. There's also this random moment we find out that she feels that he took her place in the gang, and that's brought up as a real big deal and then dropped almost immediately about halfway through the book. So in the end, it feels like there is no reason except that her emotions are on a hair trigger, which is something I'm just a bit tired of seeing presented as a common trait of female characters. And this all plays into this idea that women just take things too seriously. Women see threats in innocent men. Women take men's gallantry as an attack. Women are hysterical. Women make false accusations. And I don't think I should have to explain to you how that idea has been used to victimize real women who have already been victimized. And am I saying that this book is trying to dismiss women, trying to perpetuate rape culture, is trying to, make women out to be hysterical? No! I think the author made a real, serious, sincere attempt to present Sabetha as fairly defensive. That he's trying to present her as on guard because she has to be. I think he's trying to show that women have to be on guard in the world of men because they have a target on their backs. And I think he was trying to present a strong female character surviving a dangerous world. But it didn't come across that way to me. I also think the problem is he wanted it to go both ways. He wanted Sabetha to have a real reason to be defensive, a real reason to push Locke away. But he wasn't willing to sacrifice Locke's likability. He wanted Locke to be lovable, and so Locke couldn't be a real threat to her. He couldn't be fetishizing her. He couldn't be a sexist asshole. It had to all be a misunderstanding. But the problem is, it being a misunderstanding just makes Sabetha seem like she's overreacting. And part of the reason I'm pretty sure that the author was actively trying to really examine the dangers women face is because, frankly, sexual violence is an important plot point in this book. So yeah, if you are someone that does not feel comfortable reading about sexual violence, go ahead and skip this one. And I think, honestly, it's treated largely with the weight it deserves. The only characters who treat it as anything less than utterly horrific when sexual violence happens are themselves presented as monstrous. This book knows that sexual violence is a real threat that causes real harm. I don't think it's trying to do anything new with this knowledge. Like, it doesn't really say anything exceptional or new, but it doesn't really need to. And objectively, the fact that I feel like the presentation of Sabetha is so problematic that I honestly am glad that the author was not trying to say anything more complex than sexual assault is bad. But then there's Jean and Janora. I'm not sure how unhappy I am with this particular part of the story, but I know I'm unhappy with it. Janora is introduced to us as an adult woman. It's not clearly stated as far as I can tell. I read through it a couple times, but I didn't find anywhere that it said her exact age. But the way she interacts with the troupe and like just the way she talks to people, I interpreted her as her late 20s, maybe early 30s. And spoilers here, she starts a sexual relationship with the teenage Jean. And like, he's another one I couldn't remember. I couldn't find where it said his actual age, but he's like 16, 17 here. He's a virgin. And she specifically mentions that she likes training up virgins. And that's not okay. Like, if she's meant to be 19 years old, then yeah, maybe it's only slightly uncomfortable. But if she's meant to be older than that, if she's meant to be in her 30s the way I read her, that is dial the FBI. And like, to make it even worse, this character is one of the two that I can remember female characters that are presented as having dark skin. So she's one of two women of color in this book, and she is sexually predatory. Now, she's obviously meant to be a sympathetic character throughout the rest of the narrative. We're supposed to like her, but I can't get past the fact that she is an adult, grown woman sleeping with a teenager. So yeah, this book just did not do a great job of its representation of women. And it's the kind of not good job that makes me question if I'm actually going to read the fourth book when it comes out next year. And now there are still things I liked about this book. Like, I like getting to see more of Callow and Galdo, even though, yes, I acknowledge they are incredibly problematic characters. I like them, because the book treats them like they're problematic characters. But I also liked the fun election hijinks. I loved the section in the beginning with Locke being super self-destructive, because that's a thing that is just candy to me in books. But, fuck. I haven't talked about one of the things I hated yet. The twist. The fucking twist. I despised it. Now, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I will tell you that it has to do with where Locke came from, and it may or may not be true. And if it is true, to me, it ruins the entire meaning of the series as of yet. Because this series has so much been about the person of low birth, the little guy, rising up to, you know, give the wealthy class a punch in the balls. And I really feel like if this twist is true, it undercuts that entirely. But yeah, the book did not turn out the way I wanted it to be. And I am currently really, really, really unsure if I'm going to read the rest of the series as it comes out. But I know there were good parts of this book. And frankly, I just can't remember them because the annoying bits have overwhelmed my memories. So, yeah. I'm just disappointed.